Within these walls and in our time together, we pause amid the strains and conflicts which fill our world and fill our very beings. We need this time together as we seek for strength and confidence and direction. We trust in our togetherness that we might gain further insight into the life about us and be able to see the ways in which we can be honest, compassionate, and true to the ideals that we express in the words and deep feelings of the purposes and principles which guide us. Most especially when we are called to do all we can to bring them into notice and focus. May we find strength to meet all that life prepares for us and hold close to the strength to be free while never overestimating our own virtue as we put into honest perspective the crying need for justice that is often displayed by many in a world of conflict and deep problems. May we have the strength to see that we do not have all the answers to all the problems of life, and the awareness to know that we are not inadequate because of that. More importantly, we need the knowledge that we must never be distracted from effort and hope, in spite of all the difficulties. As we come together in our search and in our growth, we gradually formulate our personal meaning of this religion to which we have been drawn. It is why we gather together here, where we can worship in our personal way and open our minds and hearts to all. The following words are adopted from a book of meditations from Greta Crosby with a few changes. I was intrigued by her words because I related strongly to why we are drawn together. Greta wrote, "Are we responsible for everyone and everything? I have heard myself making broad statements of responsibility to protest the myopia that cannot see any link between ourselves and those who suffer next door, in the next country, or in the next room. But I have stopped saying responsible for, and now I say related to. There is a problem in feeling we are responsible for everyone and everything. The words responsible for carry a hidden meaning of blame, and it is insane to think that we are to blame for everything and everyone. The great theologies of the world have personified that feeling of ultimate blame in the chief devil and the negative potentate of their particular system. To think that we are the equal of these personifications is a delusion of inverted grandeur. The truth is that we are related to everyone and everything in some way, however many steps there may be between us or the other person or thing. In thinking about our responsibilities, asserting our interrelatedness is more truthful, more salutary, and more fruitful than assuming omni-responsibility. Instead of giving us an overload of guilt and shame, we should assert that interrelationship gives us a focus and a promise. Focusing on our relationship to anyone or anything, starting anywhere but start, can impel us to productive action. At best, this action flows from contemplation of the relationship, a growing awareness of what is there and the part we play or could play, a movement from that awareness to steps in a chosen direction with the strength to take those steps, all without assurance for a positive action, and definitely not attached to a personal reward. Some call it grace. I call it connection and interrelatedness. So be it. I so appreciate the opportunity you have given me to share some of what I learned about who we are as individuals, who we are as a religious group, and why and how we created our purposes and principles, which are our guidelines for our personal lives. These guidelines go well beyond each of our lives, however. They are powerful words that speak to us in so many ways: compassion, understanding, love, and devotion to every living being. Like many of you, I was not born and reared as a Unitarian Universalist. But every day, especially when the going gets rough, I am grateful for the day that I knew, after hearing another sermon delivered by Reverend David Reese Williams, then minister of First Unitarian of Rochester, that I had found my heaven on earth. Yes, this religion is where I think it is. Only a few years later, after I joined the church, 1961 to be exact, the Unitarian Universalist Church of America, originally founded in 1790, and the American Unitarian Association, originally founded in 1825, merged at our General Assembly in, of all places, Syracuse, New York. We became the Unitarian Universalist Association. Sometimes, reflecting on all of this, I think, why didn't this happen while I was still living in Massachusetts, where many Unitarians and Universalists were living? And why did it take them so long to merge? And why did it take me so long to become one of them? Because of the nature of both groups, this was a good deal more complicated than expected. Yes, we felt united. Yes, we had some very similar theological viewpoints. Yes, we were in favor of the merger. But how would we become one group? Looking back at the heritage of both groups, similarities and differences were very apparent. Neither group was bound by dogmas, creeds, commandments. Universalists held firmly to the belief that God as creator would never condemn any human being to eternal damnation. Universal salvation was their strong and loving belief, hence the name Universalists. Unitarians held firmly to the belief that Jesus was not God. He was a human being like all of us, and led a noble, kind, and giving life that we could and should all emulate. If Jesus was God, then the things that he did were beyond us. But if he was a human being like us, then we should do what he did. In the Council of Nicaea, Arius opposed the signing of the Trinity, spent his life in prison as a result. When I was a student at Colgate Rochester Divinity School, one of my professors introduced me to a group he was with. This is one of my students, a Unitarian Universalist. Poor thing, she only has one God. I was used to this guy's humors. And so I said loudly to his group, "Yes, but what a God." We UUs have always been good at religious jesting. Once I always liked was Universalists believe that everyone will go to heaven when they die. Unitarians believe that they will go to heaven when they die. Yep. Even today, as individuals, we don't agree on everything. Are we a denomination that is a single religious entity, or merely an association of independent congregations? Is every congregation's independence founded in a common cause call to denominational beliefs and commitments? Do we call the places where we gather for worship churches or meeting halls? Indeed, do we worship? All hard questions. But since we don't all believe the same thing, an even harder question was what to say when asked what UUs believe. Rejecting a creed was easy, but we needed some verbal formula about which all, or at least most of us, can say, yes, that's what I more or less believe. When Reverend Eugene Pickett assumed UUA presidency after his predecessor had died for less than 2 years, Pickett said, "The deeper malaise lies in our confusion as to what words we have to spread. The old watchwords of liberalism, freedom, reason, tolerance, worthy though they may be, are simply not catching the process and the imagination of the contemporary world. They may describe a way for approaching religious depth, but they testify to no intimate acquaintance with the depths themselves." Jean was referring to this document that had been written when the Unitarians and the Universalists merged. To strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. To relate to the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. To affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. To implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. To serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion. To encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. Well, not bad. Not too bad, that is, compared with the original documents drawn from the principles and some of the statements of the Universalist Church of America, which had to be addressed. Such statements as, we believe there is one God whose nature is love, revealed in one Lord Jesus Christ by some Holy Spirit of grace, who will finally restore the whole family of mankind to holiness and happiness. All should practice order so that holiness and happiness are profitable unto men. Love to God and love to man was one of the greatest sources of contention. Women were the catalysts. Much of the credit for starting on the long and meandering path that led to adoption of the reformulated principles must go to women. Over many years, women, though of course not women alone, had been growing unhappy with what they felt was blatantly sexual language in the original bylaws, including a reference to the dignity of man. The 1970s, when the U.S. women's movement was gathering momentum, there was an ongoing effort to find and remove the most offensive terminology. Most of all moderators, presidents, indeed every officer, and yes, all ministers were referred to as he. Brotherhood and fellowship survived well into the 1980s. Change was happening, though, in society as well as in denominations. For us, the main impetus for change definitely came from the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation, known as UUWF. As they spent time, energy, and determination on a UU Continental Conference on Women and Religion was held in Lakeland, Ohio. One workshop was called The UU Principles, Do They Affirm Us as Women? Reverend Edward Frost, who edited a book of essays by UU ministers called With Purpose and Principle, including a chapter by Frost himself that discusses women's role in ministry and other occupations, wrote that the delegates on this conference felt the original UUA principles not only failed to affirm them as women, but they failed to indicate a respect for the wholeness of life and for the earth. Natalie Gilbranson, a former UUA moderator and then board member, became the president of the UU Women's Federation in 1979. She was well acquainted with how heated General Assembly debates could become after being a moderator. So when the UUWF and its supporters put forward a Women in Religion resolution in 1977, she had many concerns about how things would turn out. It went relatively well. While some delegates couldn't accept that they or their association was patriarchal, we explained it, Natalie said, and as she recalls, the resolution passed almost unanimously. The resolution called on leaders at all levels of the UUA to make every effort to put some of the language in the perspective that may result in some changes. There was still an awful lot to accomplish. Natalie remembers that she had difficulty with some members of her own church. They said, the term mankind doesn't leave out women. Well, Natalie said, women are human beings, not men. Think of other terms you could use. Human beings, humankind. Those would be universally inclusive and properly descriptive. Natalie was not accusing only men of this divisiveness. She had problems with many women, too. Once when she attended the International Association of Religious Freedom and shared the resolution with them, English women were furious. They asked her why we wanted to do such a thing. In spite of all the problems the UUWF were encountering, though, they felt a wave was coming. By 1981, a non-sexist revision of the Principles and Purpose drafted by various women's groups was presented to the General Assembly. This didn't go smoothly, as you can imagine. Did you ever take part in any discussion on such revisions that was not subject to controversy? And even though this can be difficult and maybe even unnecessary by those who feel a lack of authoritarianism only adds to difficulty and preventing needed progress, there are others who feel lack of authoritarianism opens us to deep feelings and ideals. It may slow progress a bit. I clearly see that. Nevertheless, when we are allowed and even invited to express ourselves is one of the aspects of our denomination that I love. There was overtly expressed uneasiness among many UUs from Christian backgrounds too, who saw doing this as a possibility that they would no longer be accepted. The new moderator, Denise Davidoff, made a bold decision, which in retrospect was a proper decision. She proposed that a committee be set up to study all aspects of the issue and report back to the GA in a subsequent year. The motion passed. The committee was set up and launched. The Reverend Walter Jones, then a parish minister, now retired, headed the committee for most of its existence. He sent out questionnaires asking congregations and individual UUs for suggestions about what the new statement of principles might say. Not everyone thought that was a great idea, of course. Did you ever find a group of us anywhere that agrees on every issue? No, that's not us. In spite of the skeptical and disapproving ones, though, the committee also received many contributions of great merit, which in turn is circulated for further mention. After about 4 years of discussion, meetings, general assemblies, delegates questioning, voting, making changes, Universalists from all over the country and Canada, because they were part of our group then, gathered at the Ohio State University campus for the 11th General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist congregations. The great focus of this GA was a vote on the newly written purposes and principles. As is usual in such complicated issues, and most especially in groups that allow for inclusion by all, not just authority figures, it was a very, very long and detailed and tiring assembly. Things were going well, but everything all settled. When the document was pretty close to being finished, an almost perfect connection to our spiritual tradition, there was still some unsettled feelings. Change a word here, change a word there, in keeping with our style. For myself, it seemed perfect, right in keeping with what I felt was our tradition. Then the Reverend Paul LaRue made his way to the microphone. I can still see Paul. At ease, with microphone in hand, he then addressed the seventh principle, which was already pretty well stated. But when he spoke his revision to the principle with these words, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, the room grew quiet. I imagined the world outside growing quiet too, and a glow broke through the Ohio daylight, shooting beams into the air. As one minister described it, the roof blew off the convention center, and a host of angels and celestial beings from all the world's religions, past and present, descended on us. Well, I can't go that far, but I do remember the deep feelings, my own and those of people all around me. We even reached out and grabbed each other's hands. What a day. Again, I was so grateful that I had found this religion. I remain so today. The concern that had been expressed by some of Christian heritage that they would be ignored by the principles and purposes was also deeply thought about. And then the sources were proposed as another way to approach our purposes and principles, that we would refer to the sources which we drew them from. Eventually, at another General Assembly, not too long after Paul's seventh principle of the interdependent existence of all, then we said also we drew from natural sources. So we worked on changing them, and today there's still talk, and you may hear sometime about people that want to make some changes in our purposes and principles. It could even be brought up at another General Assembly or whatever. But to me, the fact that we do that we think hard enough, consciously enough, caring enough to make sure that the way we want to present ourselves and to be known in the world is a way that will be helpful, not to us personally, it's not our personal reward, it's to get a focus on the way we are talking about living in this world. I remember when Abraham Lincoln's famous statement, a government of all the people, for all the people, by all the people, was stated and highly praised. Never, however, did anyone mention that Unitarian minister Theodore Parker wrote that. Lincoln's writer took out one word, all. I want to end with Parker's statement, putting all back in, taking out government and putting religion in. How would that go? We are a religion of all the people, for all the people, by all the people. That's the way I like to think about our purposes and principles and all of the sources that we used to put those purposes and principles into effect. I want us to keep focusing on them, especially as so many crucial, sad, terrible things are happening all the time. If it wasn't for my own personal feelings about some of who we are and the things that we can do in this world, I would be almost ready to give up. But because of you and all the other Unitarian Universalists and other people that don't come to our churches either, but agree with us a lot, because we do exist and we are part of the interdependent web of all existence, we will make it better, I believe. Okay. With me. Closing, are you going to play a number?
I'll play a little song.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.